In this video, we're going to do a quick introduction to educational psychology to get us started for the semester. We often think about educational psychology as being a bridge. On the one hand, we have students learning in classrooms, there's teachers teaching, and on the other side, we have fields such as psychology and neuroscience, which might have something to say about teaching and learning. And so I typically think about educational psychology as a field that makes this bridge in between what is happening in classrooms and what's happening in laboratory, more sterile conditions in which psychology and neuroscience experiments may be taking place. In the National Academy of Sciences, How People Learn, Chapter 1, it's going to be something you'll take a look at this week. They give a brief sort of historical progression of educational psychology just to kind of map that out. They talk about three essential buckets or categories of progression. So educational psychology, this was even before behaviorism, it's been around since the late 1800s, early 1900s. Started really with psychologists thinking about how can we apply what we know about psychology to teaching and learning in classrooms. If you've taken psychology courses before, if you haven't, that's fine. You may be familiar with this term behaviorism. So psychology, there was sort of this emphasis for a time in the mid 20th century to really try to increase the rigor of psychology to study observable behaviors. And so that was also done within the sort of educational psychology research realm, where we were most interested in studying observable behaviors in classrooms, things that you could easily see and measure happening. So this could be performance on tests, this could be sort of classroom management type things. And so this kind of guides the questions that educational psychology was interested in. It was sort of stimulus, response, cause, effect, things people were studying. Ultimately, though, folks got interested in what we might call sort of cognitive science, or science, sort of how people think and reason and understand. This cognitive science was a pushback against behaviorism and sort of an outgrowth in the sense that, like, maybe it's not just behaviors that matter, but actually how are people thinking about the problem. So if the behavior is, I get a 50% score on a math test, the cognitive science approach then is like, well, what's going on behind the thinking and reasoning that led to that score? It's not just the performance itself. And so cognitive science kind of went through this sort of two-phase where it started off being what we called at a time like cold cognition, cold in the sense that it was really just focused on thinking and reasoning. And then it moved to what we term warm cognition, which included motivation. So kind of as I guess like warming up the feelings and including those in our cognitive science studies. The National Academy of Science chapter then terms what they call the new science of learning, and you will note this was published in 2000, so they have since updated it, but there's still a lot of really good stuff in this chapter and in this report. So we're going to take a look both at this 2000 version and the 2020-21 version. And so there's they identify a couple different themes about this new science of learning, including things such as students' metacognition. That's something we'll get into, but that's sort of like thinking about your own thinking. And there's a couple other themes. I won't spoil those right here. To wrap up, a few things that kind of make EdPsych unique within psychology. So within the psychology field, there's all these different types of psychology. So we have clinical psychology, developmental psychology, cognition and learning, and those are kind of each given a different course within the undergraduate curriculum typically. And so what is it about educational psychology that kind of stands out? So pulling from this article, there are 4 things that were identified. 1, there's focus on learning in subject areas rather than learning in general. So we're focused on how do students learn history? How do we learn mathematics? How do students get motivated in physical education classes? So we're looking really at those specific subject areas. There's more of a focus on authentic learning tasks rather than contrived laboratory tasks. So this is really trying to, if I'm interested in student memory for history, instead of just asking students to memorize random lists of dates, as we might do in a sort of more lab-based task, maybe I'm going to ask them to do a more authentic task like you would in a high school, like a history class. So we're maybe ordering dates or putting them in context. Number three, cognitive processes are a focus during learning, and we're focused on learning outcomes. So it's kind of it's not just this piece, and it's not just the cognitive science piece. It's kind of combining all of those, looking at learning as a process that's happening, but also caring about different learning outcomes. And so we'll talk about a whole array. So things like how well students understand different concepts in science, to can they perform different skills in mathematics, to how are they going about doing those, to do they have beliefs in their ability to do these different types of tasks, are they motivated to do them, do they find them interesting. Those are all things that fall within the realm of ed psych. And then finally, we also look at instructional techniques that guide cognitive processing during learning. So there's a lot of focus, and we'll be focusing a lot on sort of the student side of things. But there's the other part of the equation is the teacher within the classroom. And so the research that happens within educational psychology is also focused on the sort of teaching aspects as they impact learning. And there's also a whole other area of work within educational psychology, or area that people conduct research that's really looking at teachers learning and how do teachers learn. And we're not going to get so much into that this semester, but just to kind of bring that into the picture.